Madam President.
Senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask unanimous consent that the confirmation vote on the Greenberg nomination occur following the completion of my remarks and those of Senator Brown.
Without objection.
Thank you. Madam President, I've always believed that serving the people of Tennessee requires that I meet them right there in their communities, and I bring their ideas to Washington to put those perspectives to work. What we do on Capitol Hill gets a lot of attention, but back home is where the real work of making this country work really gets done. And so this year I've completed another of my tours of all 95 counties. That is every county in our state. And at every stop, I met with local officials, business owners, civic leaders, and citizens who really keep these communities afloat. And that is a task that my Democratic colleagues have made almost impossible with their massive spending bills and their attacks on small businesses. In so many ways, that situation mirrors that of thousands of families struggling under record-breaking inflation and broken supply chains. During teletown hall calls with Tennesseans in each of our 95 counties, this was a constant refrain. They're finding more month at the end of their paycheck than paycheck at the end of their month. From the moment their feet hit the floor in the morning till they put their head on the pillow at night, Tennesseans are counting their pennies and wondering when the Democrats are going to put their radical agenda aside and go back to putting the American people first. In spite of the mess the Democrats have made with the national economy, Tennessee communities are growing because their local leaders follow the same rules with their county coffers that they do with their small business or their household budgets. They spend within their means. They only buy what they need, and they keep their paperwork in order. Washington would do well to follow their example and embrace two key pieces of legislation I introduced this year. In response to the 40-year high inflation the Democrats caused with their spending spree, I filed a resolution to raise the Senate voting threshold to 2/3 of all senators for all spending bills if inflation is higher than 4%. I also introduced the IRS User Fee Reduction Act. This bill would lower IRS user fees by 95% for those with a gross income of less than $5 million and allow these small businesses to use the services the IRS offers without getting hit with a massive bill. Times are hard enough for taxpayers without having to worry that their government is working against them. We saw plenty of evidence this year showing that the bureaucracy is actively preventing growth and development. The commencement of the massive Blue Oval City project in Haywood County, Tennessee, was clogged in permitting red tape and agency misalignment. It took a remarkable effort to straighten that out, but we got the job done, and now they are on their way to creating thousands of jobs. Before this fall, the McKellar-Sipes Airport in Jackson, Tennessee, had been without TSA service for 13 years. But by working with the folks in Jackson and with the TSA, I was able to get that service set up for outgoing passengers. Now, this area of West Tennessee has reliable commercial air transportation. But remember, getting rid of red tape, getting it out of the way, this is something our local governments had to go fight for, and it shouldn't be that way. Meanwhile, Tennessee farmers are in the fight of their lives over a combination of unsustainable fuel and fertilizer prices and regulatory burdens so heavy they're destroying the concept of the family farm. They are the reason I called on the Biden administration to pursue energy independence, and they are the reason I will keep fighting to implement an Operation Warp Speed for American-produced energy. The government's job is not to micromanage. Our job is to give these businesses the tools they need to create the environment that they need for jobs growth to take place. That's what we did when we passed the Drive Safe Act, to make it easier for the trucking industry to hire and train the workers they need to ease the strains on our supply chains. It's what Senator Menendez and I did when we introduced our Supply Chain Database Act, which became law this year. Soon, manufacturers will have access to the information they need to meet demand. This will make a huge difference in Hamlin County, Tennessee. Morristown is home to more than 109 manufacturing companies. About 25% of the jobs available in Morristown are associated with these manufacturers, which is about double the national average. This focus on using innovation to help local economies flourish is making a difference elsewhere in Tennessee. The Oak Ridge National Lab is home to Frontier, which is the world's fastest supercomputer, and the first ever exascale computer. It's also a magnet for talent. People and businesses are moving to East Tennessee to take advantage of the jobs and the other opportunities that our investment in Oak Ridge has created. Elsewhere in Oak Ridge, high school students are already benefiting from investment in research and education opportunities in advanced manufacturing. And the Smart Factory Institute in Cleveland, Tennessee, is running a state-of-the-art vocational training facility that is revolutionizing workforce development and training. None of this would be happening if Washington had ignored the request of local leaders. This year, I brought this same local focus to my work with the healthcare industry. Rural hospitals are struggling in every state, and in Tennessee, this is leaving thousands of people without access to basic health care. The telehealth expansion policies that became mainstream during the pandemic saved lives and brought health care to people who had never had easy access to a doctor. This year, I fought to make those expansions permanent. And I also persuaded CMS to keep the low-wage index hospital policy on the books. For at least another year, this will protect rural hospitals from losing out on the reimbursements they need to keep the doors open. And if rural patients need to fill a prescription after a doctor's visit, they'll be able to do so. I secured a new rule that would prohibit PBMs from clawing back fees from community pharmacists. This will bring some much-needed stability to those businesses and allow them to keep serving rural customers. And this kind of targeted support is paying off. In March, we broke ground on the standalone Fentress County Emergency Department. It took more than a few phone calls with CMS to sort out the waivers, but we got it done, and now we're doing the same work in Clay County. Tennessee is home also to the finest military community in the country, and this year they had to wait until the 11th hour to see if the Senate would come through with a defense authorization bill. It had been dangling over their heads since July, and they are truly relieved to see that it finally passed. And I want to thank my colleagues on the Armed Services Committee for supporting the amendments I submitted on behalf of Tennessee's service members and their families. They are the most important element of our national defense, which is why I championed the repeal of the COVID vaccine mandate. I believe that no one brave enough to don that uniform should have to choose between taking a shot and losing their job. Madam President, Tennessee's military community was ecstatic to hear that the U.S. Senate agrees with me on that statement. We have a duty to take care of our men and women in uniform during and after their service. That's why I fought to include support for workforce development and STEM training in the NDAA, and why I will keep fighting for expanded access to community care. So once those service members return to civilian life, they will be able to see a doctor close to home when they need to see them. As much as Tennesseans focus on national security, they're equally concerned with safety in their own communities. Since mid-2019, America's largest cities have seen a significant rise in violent crime. In Tennessee, law enforcement officials are struggling due to a lack of funding and manpower. The Restoring Law and Order Act, which I introduced earlier this year with Senator Hagerty, will provide much-needed resources to law enforcement so that they can get drugs off the streets and put criminals behind bars and keep them there. I truly hope that my Democratic colleagues will agree that this sounds much more effective than defunding these police departments. We need to get this bill passed and to the President's desk. And just this month, President Biden signed my Speak Out Act into law. This bans the use of pre-dispute non-disclosure agreements in situations involving sexual misconduct. I want to thank Senator Gillibrand for working so hard on this legislation with me. And I also want to thank Senator Blumenthal for working with me to get Reese's Law across the finish line. Now, this will require new safety standards for toys and other products to prevent children from swallowing button batteries. Safety was a key theme of the work we did together on the Committee for Consumer Protection this year. As we explored ways that we could rein in big tech, we looked to regain control over your virtual you, your presence online, and also to introduce competition into the tech sector. This past February, Senator Blumenthal and I introduced the Kids Online Safety Act after a series of hearings that exposed big tech's disregard for the safety of its underage users. We also worked closely together on the Open App Market Act, which will stop tech giants from stifling competition in the App Store marketplace. Both of these bills have earned extensive bipartisan support, and I see no reason why we won't be able to get them across the finish line very soon. I want to conclude by thanking the thousands of local officials and leaders and the Tennesseans who dedicate so much of their time and their energy to making Tennessee a wonderful place to call home. I'm grateful for their hard work and their willingness to work with me for a better Tennessee. I yield the floor.